Jacob, please. How aware and then maybe thus divided is the Tanzanian people when it comes to this issue of constitutional issues that come up? Like
how divided we are?
Correct. Yeah.
I think as far as we are divided as you can imagine, there are people. A polity like Tanzania will always have those who benefit from the system. You will have always people who, because they benefit, they aid and abet the system. You will have people who, because they benefit, they justify the system. And we have our fair share of those. And there are people who, for a variety of reasons, just don't think that their problems have anything to do with the way the country's governance is organized. People think that they are poor because, God did not, bless them with, there's a very popular saying in Tanzania, God is a giver. Yeah? So you have people stealing money left, right, and center. They're becoming very rich. And there are millions who think that, well, these are blessed by God. Yeah? So the country is not united on the need for constitutional reform, as you, I think, expect of any country in circumstances such as this. Yeah. Yes? Yes, please?
I just had a question about you referencing the first president as a clean man and the second president as focusing on self-enrichment. What should this change between them?
Our first president, as I said, created this system. The constitutional foundations of Tanzania today were laid in, and our presided over that system for 24 years. He left office in 1985. He was always the first to admit that he had enormous powers. I think he once had an interview with the BBC in which he said, look, I have sufficient powers under the constitution and the laws to be a dictator. And many people say he wasn't a dictator. And we say he certainly didn't steal. He was a very simple man. I was joking earlier in the day that he was a son of a chief, and the chiefs tend to be very extravagant. He was a very simple man. He was like a monk. Yeah, you wouldn't notice any of his children on Tanzanian streets today, while you would almost immediately single out Mwinyi. Mwinyi was our second president. You would immediately single out his children. You would single out the children of Kikwete because they're ministers. The wife is in parliament. Nowadays, after 2 years in office, you would almost immediately single out Samia's son because suddenly he's the go-to person if you want to have things your way. So why is it that this president, who was otherwise very clean, what is this contradiction that you have a very clean president being succeeded by these corrupt successors? I think the answer lies in the power structures that he created. He created a presidency which was totally unaccountable to anyone or any institution. And human beings are human beings. You have few clean ones and then you have everybody else who may not necessarily be corrupt at the beginning, but once they get into power and they realize how powerful they can be and how rich they can become and get away with it, and they change. So I think the secret lies in this imperial presidency, in this constitutional scheme that was created in 1962. Yes, I saw that one, and then to you.
Yeah, to follow up on that question, I was just thinking, like, why was the first president given like so much power at the start when making the constitution? Were there any objection to that? That's my first question. And then the second question is, do you see it any way out for Tanzania in the future? I mean, you mentioned briefly about constitutional reform, but then given the president with such unchecked and unlimited power, he would definitely not willing to give out that power willingly. So do you see any way out for the country?
I think I'll start with the second.
Okay.
I wouldn't be doing what I do if I wasn't hopeful that we can change. I think I'm optimistic that we'll have a much better deal than we have had for many, many years. But I know, I'm not naive, I know that it will be very, very difficult. It will be very, very costly. But the Tanzanian people, as all other peoples, can only put up with this kind of abuses for a time. And in recent years, the calls for reform have grown so much. I believe we will win at the end of the day. We will get a better deal than we have had. With regard to the first, what happened in 1962? Why was the president allowed to have this kind of system? My book tells that story. My book, The Remaining in the Shadows, tells that story in great detail. But briefly, we get independence in 1961 from the British, and the constitutional order that we inherited from the British was one of what is called the Westminster model, a parliamentary democracy. We didn't have a president. We had a prime minister as head of government. Now, as you may know, in a parliamentary democracy, a prime minister is amenable to removal by parliament on a simple motion of no confidence. And prime ministers in parliamentary democracies are easily restrained by parliament. So in the first year of independence, Nyerere, the president, there would be president, there was a prime minister, and he immediately started, the campaign to move away from the Westminster model. The argument was, this is a model that we were given by these colonialists. Yeah, this is a model that makes for a very weak government. We need a strong government in order to bring development faster. We need a government that will transform the country. The ideology of developmentalism. Everything was done in the name of development. So we need a strong government in order to quicken the pace of development. The argument was, we should run while others are walking. We should catch up with the rest of the world. And to catch up with the rest of the world, we need a strong government. And so that's what happened. Now the strange thing, the government prepared a white paper on the republic, on what the system was going to be like. So we had a government white paper on Tanganyika Republic. Now, in there, it was written, historians have said that actually that was Nyerere's handwork. He wrote it himself. It's the argument for a republic. Now, in that white paper, the government argued, and the words are very instructive. What was their vision of this president? What type of leader was this president going to be? And it said, for us, and I'm actually quoting, for us, the powers, privileges, and prerogatives of a king or chief are not separated from the authority that he wields, and they will not be different from the powers, privileges, and prerogatives of the president in our republic. So here is Nyerere arguing that the future president was going to be as powerful as those absolute kings and emperors of basically 18th century Europe. So the vision was very clear. The inspiration was not really a republic. The inspiration was absolute monarchies of Europe. All the tribal chiefs, where his father was a tribal chief. So that was the vision. That was the vision. But the argument was we need development and we need the country to develop faster and so on. And this is the structure that he created. Of course, after 25 years of being president, we were even more backward than when he found us. But we had no rights. We could not do anything. And, you know, that argument and the model has failed. There was a hand there, and then I'll come to you.
To what extent outside forces
They play an oversized role. Running the country's ports is a multi-billion-dollar business. So even if we don't have the documents to prove it, because they don't issue receipts when they bribe our public officials. But my belief is millions of dollars would have changed hands to make the president cede control of our ports. In the 90s, when we liberalized our mineral sector, our mining sector, to create conditions for Barrick Gold and other mining multinationals to take over. And I told you I spent years trying to fight Barrick. When I was researching how they got hold of one of those mines, someone from Canada managed to obtain documents from the government of Canada under the Freedom of Information Act. So he obtained a bunch of diplomatic dispatches from Dar es Salaam, between Dar es Salaam and Ottawa, between the Canadian High Commission and the Canadian Foreign Ministry. And in one of those documents, I found a document, a message from the then Canadian High Commissioner to Tanzania, writing home on the day after President Mkapa was sworn in as president. And it starts by saying, our man has been sworn in as president, President Mkapa is known for his links with Canada from the time he served as Tanzania's High Commissioner in Ottawa in the 70s. And then she added, now the Bulyanhulu file will move. The Bulyanhulu file, Bulyanhulu is Barrick's, flagship gold mine in Tanzania. That's where in 1996 they kicked out more than 400,000 people. And that file had not moved prior to 1996 because the government of President Mwinyi did not resisted these attempts from Barrick Gold and its affiliates and pressures from the Canadian High Commission to get rid of the local miners. So Mkapa comes to office in 95. In December of 95, and within days, the Canadian High Commissioner is writing home that our man has been sworn in. Now the Bulyanhulu file will move. And it took 7 months, and the people were getting rid of them. Dozens were killed. So the corporate influence on governmental decision making is right. Yes, and then you. Yes.
So I was kind of looking through some articles about interviews that you've done, and you've spoken about the new constitution, really pushing for a new constitution. So to what extent do you think that reform is appropriate for just different governmental agencies and just the overall government structure? And to what extent do you think that there just needs to be a complete new, overhaul in some ways? And I guess a follow-up question, to what extent do you think that, because there have been different international organizations that have called for the current government to allow for freedom of demonstration and free speech and stuff, and to what extent do you think that there is merit behind the government actually allowing people to protest and to say what they want to say? And I guess do you foresee there being pushback?
We started the quest for constitutional reform when we were still a one-party state in the 80s. And in 1991, a presidential commission which had been established to investigate whether we needed to go multi-party or remain as a one-party state, recommended that we become a multi-party state, a recommendation which was immediately accepted by the government. But the second and most important recommendation of that commission was a new constitution. And that constitutional commission argued that the current constitution, it was current in 1991, it is still in place today. So the commission said in 1991 that the current constitution is essentially a one-party constitution. It cannot serve a multi-party democracy. It cannot serve the new conditions of multi-party democracy, and therefore it has to be a completely overhauled to create a more democratic and multi-party constitution. In other words, the commission was arguing for overhaul of the political system, changing the political power map of the Tanzanian state. That the government did not accept, the powers that we rejected, and they have rejected to this day. So the kind of constitutional reform we are talking about are those that will overhaul our state and the institutions of the state, which will change the balance of power between the institutions of the state, the presidency, if we retain it, the legislature, the judiciary, as well as a balance of power between the state and we citizens, because we have been completely disempowered by a constitution that does not give any rights to the citizens to hold their elected officials to account. So it is total overhaul. But of course, I know and you know that doesn't come easy, and therefore it will take a while. It will take reforms. We'll have to go through processes of minimalist reforms, but eventually, I think eventually we'll get a better and more democratic constitutional order, because I cannot imagine us going forward like this in the next 20 years. I frankly don't see it.
Yeah. I'm mindful of the time. If this is an acceptable question, the answer to Jackie's question, could we combine the last two as we're about to get kicked out of the room in a short period?
Okay. There was a hand here. Yes. And
Tyler, and who were the next two that you had already chosen?
Now, yes.
So my question really briefly is, with that corruption at the very top, do you think that affects or inspires abuse of power at lower levels?
Everywhere. We have a system which is, if you allow me, rotten from top to bottom. That system has allowed a situation where you have on the one hand elected officials who are totally powerless, because real power lies with unelected officials. Just as real power does between the president and the parliament lies with the president. Our parliament is just a rubber stamp. So all through the system, from top to bottom, you have structures of authoritarianism. You have structures of lack of accountability everywhere, and therefore corruption is top to bottom.
That was actually pretty much my question, but a follow-up on... That was actually my question as well, but a follow-up on that was, you mentioned that a lot of people view tie religion to the authoritative figures, and imagining that God is blessing them. So if corruption is coming all the way down to that localized level, are they still tying God to blessing those people, or just the people at the top?
Can you clarify? Are they?
I guess I'm just asking, are they, if they're aware of the corruption at the lower levels, that it's not tied to religion, are they still tying corruption at the high levels to religion as well? Or are they just viewing their riches of the high level authoritative figures as blessings from God?
I think the common view is, corruption starts at our feet with our local leaders at the lowest levels. You don't get if you need to go to hospital because you had an accident, you need a police letter from the police saying that, well, you were involved in an accident, otherwise we won't get treated. Now, how do you get that letter from the police? You got to pay for it, and all and up and down. You go to clinic, you need to see the doctor, you get to pay. So it is not just tied to the top, it is everywhere. If I understood your question correctly.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
If I can take a prerogative about that, but we do have 3 more minutes actually, so we're okay. So
yes, I see your hand. Yes, and then you.
I think you touched on a few points, but I was wondering, being that you've had such a challenging journey throughout just trying to figure out how to better your country, I was wondering what your future steps are. From what I understand, you want to be presidential candidate. I was wondering how, in such
an opposition party, what happens next? Will you be okay considering that elections have been targeted?
I'll tell you what happened in the last general election. Well, apart from being tear gassed several times in the course of the 2-month campaign, can you imagine of a leading presidential candidate of the opposition being tear gassed by the police in order to be prevented from addressing a campaign rally? Well, that happened to me a couple times. Apart from that, we went to the elections, people went to vote. Results of the elections were declared. The president, the sitting president, was declared the winner with some, I think, 12 million votes to 1.9 of mine. So it was a really lopsided, if you believe that. Our electoral law requires the publication of those results on a constituency by constituency basis. So you have to show what the candidates got in every constituency across the country. We are still waiting for those results 3 years after the general election. All right? In other words, there is no proof that the sitting president was ever elected. There are no results. But she's a president. All right? And she's a president because our constitution says if the commission, the electoral commission, declares you the winner, you are the winner. No court proceedings are allowed. No challenge of any kind is allowed. So we have a president who cannot prove that she was elected or she and her predecessor were elected because the votes that they obtained do not exist. So the question you are raising is, so I must be crazy to think of going to the elections again, right? Because those conditions, the conditions that allowed us to have a president who cannot prove that she was elected, the same conditions exist today. And that is a conversation that we are having right now. There is a conversation that I had only 2 nights ago, and I have been talking about this for the past 3 years. How do we go to the next elections under the same conditions? In 2019, we had local elections, and in those local elections, 96% of the opposition candidates were disqualified. 96%. So, at the local level, it is all CCM, it's all the ruling party, because they disqualified everybody. And in the general elections in 2020, in parliamentary elections, they disqualified 28 opposition candidates. And therefore, you have about 12% of members of the National Assembly, members of Parliament, who were not elected because their opponents were disbarred from participating in the elections. Serious issues, serious problems. We have to find answers to. And these are very real practical problems. They are not theoretical at all. How do we go to the elections under these conditions again? Yeah?
I'm very sad to say that the next class is going to start in this room quite soon. And so we are out of time. I wish we did have more, but let's thank Mr. Lissu very much for his time.
Thank you.
And to keep up our tradition, after any discussion on some of the world's more pressing issues.
Yeah.
I present to you an umbrella.
Yeah.
That's a token of our appreciation, and maybe we'll turn on the news some night. We'll see you at a rainy rally with our Masters of International Business program umbrella.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, everyone. See you on Monday.
Yeah. Was it good? Okay.
Tushatu tumemaliza na darasa limekwisha. Asanteni sana kwa kufuatilia. Tutaonana katika Good Morning Africa 11:40 11:45. Thank you.
They actually many good things. And the good days are, I go to rallies. I do a lot of meetings, public meetings, and you cannot imagine the amount of the kind of hope, and not just hope, but when people are very upset about conditions that they are forced to live. And people make change when they are upset. You know, people don't make the kind of change that is needed, with smiles on their faces. They have to, yeah, and you see that a lot. And I think that's a good
Empowering people.
Yes. My politics are very local. I always talk about their local stuff. There is constitutional politics, you know.
So a lot about education.
It's a lot about education. A lot about education. About dealing with very pressing practical problems. People are upset, arrested, and they're held in police jails. And if I pay a visit to a local police station, a lot of people get released because they know I'll cause a sting. So those kinds of things. Those kinds of things.
I feel almost partially complicit when it comes to. I had the incredible pleasure to come actually visit Tanzania about 2 years ago. It's a Ngorongoro crater. Incredibly beautiful up there too, in the Serengeti for the Great Migration, and seeing some of the safari camps, working with the Maasai, putting them there, but it's not the same because I believe that they've still been removed off the lands. It's that education. What is it from our end that we can really be doing, especially for travelers from some of these other businesses or non-government? Like, what can be done?
If we could find a way of showing people that their tourist dollars are causing murder and mayhem in this place, it would be better.
Because I could see them being built, especially outside.
In Ngorongoro. Ngorongoro is the most lucrative tourist attraction in the country. Brings in hundreds of millions of dollars annually. And the Maasai, those who you have those wildlife because this Maasai have been there 400 years. They are some of the poorest people in the country. Maasai have been reduced to begging for food. in a place which brings in hundreds of millions of dollars revenue annually is simply because people don't know.
It's wild to see the
People
resort.
love the animals. They don't know how their love of this beautiful place is actually funding genocide.
I mean, the difference between the resorts and then even the mud village structures is wild.
We can continue the conversation, but we do have to do it outside the room.
Okay.
Because you don't want to see Professor Pimentel angry.
Oh, you don't.
It's not.
You're ready, Frank.
10 minutes. Starting the first 10 minutes, it was fresh and popping.
I see.
Yeah.
So these guys all knew about it. They just read it.
Let's take it to the hallway.
Oh yeah, I'm stuck.